Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today we're gonna answer some viewer questions. It is about that time, I believe. I have them all print-screened on my phone, so let's get to it. Okay, so first question comes from Paul, and this is about an intergeneric that he got from somebody else. And you're asking my opinion about the whole situation. Well, I believe that Oncidium orchids can very well bounce back and do okay without leaves as well. The pseudobulbs store nutrients and they have those eyes at the base which form new growth. So even if the Oncidium doesn't have leaves, if it has a few roots, that's even better, but it doesn't really need leaves to create a new growth. About the fertilizer issue, I would be careful with fertilizing, especially in these conditions, because the pseudobulb already has stored nutrients and the growth it will create, it will not be impressive. It's just gonna be like a tiny little thing. So the orchid doesn't really need all that much fertilizer. So if you fertilize a little bit too much, you could actually burn the roots. What I suggest you do now is flush. Just use plain water and flush the pot. Oh, and PS, you have it in a community pot? I would put it in a separate pot. It's just a little better, you can monitor it better. The orchid roots will start to grow and at some point it will tangle with all of the other plants. Also be careful about the medium you're using. There's a whole lot of issues with community planting. I personally wouldn't do it. I tried it a lot of years ago. It didn't end up so well. What happened was the plants just shared a disease between them and that wasn't funny. So about the community planting, it's really up to you. I personally don't like community planting with orchids. I like all of them to have their own pots, especially the sickly ones because I can monitor them better. I can care for the roots better in the sense that I'm just making sure they have the space they want and the drying out they need or not, the air they need and so on. So two things, fertilizer, be careful, better fertilize less, and in between just flush with plain water to remove all of that salt. And second, the community planting, I wouldn't go for it. That's just my opinion and I hope it works out. Alrighty, Cyril, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. They're asking me if there is a more attentive way to care for Phalaenopsis orchids in bloom or just continue to normal routine. I pretty much continue to normal routine. I don't really change anything, but there are a few things that I keep in mind. One of them is temperature. Phalaenopsis orchids are really not cool growing orchids, and even though we give them that cool down to initiate flower spikes, it's not really all that cold. It's about 17-18 degrees Celsius. After the spikes are initiated, it is better to put them in warmer conditions, 20 degrees Celsius and above. This is because some Phalaenopsis complex hybrids have a tendency to drop buds or flowers in very low temperatures, and you can never know which one is more sensitive. In the same temperature, you can have some hybrids which don't drop flowers and some that do, so you might as well not take the risk. Also, I try to make sure they don't go super bone dry and flop their leaves, because if that happens, there is a chance some buds will blast. And about fertilizer, it's really no problem if you fertilize while orchids are in bloom. Being that usually phals are in bloom in winter time, the quantity of fertilizer and the frequency usually is reduced because we have shorter days, maybe cooler temperatures, so watering is reduced. The orchid doesn't grow all that much, so yes, you can absolutely reduce fertilizer, especially if your environment is affected by the weather outside, but it's really no danger if you fertilize. I do continue to fertilize in the winter as well, although very infrequent. Fertilizer will pretty much not make Phalaenopsis orchids drop their flowers or buds. Sandra is asking if orchids are poisonous to cats. Now, I'm not a cat owner and I didn't do the research, but from what I see on the internet and with other people, cats nibble on orchids pretty much all the time and nothing bad happens. Orchids generally are not toxic, not to humans, not to animals. Again, generally, I'm not sure if there is a species which contains something, but I doubt it. The best thing to do though is to research. I know there are some websites which specify what plants are poisonous to cats. I know I found the lily, which is poisonous to cats, and a few other plants. So there is a website if you just look for it. I don't have it in my mind right now. Or if you guys have cats and you have orchids and you have done the research, just let us know down below if orchids pose any threat to cats. I wouldn't worry. I see a lot of people having issues with cats eating their orchids and nothing bad happens, but just to be safe, do the research. Now here's an interesting question. Blink Bunny asks, how come the shops or nurseries don't treat the plants against pests, that is? And well, here's the catch. They do. They always treat with fungicides, pesticides, and all of those things. But the problem is they treat so much that the pests developed resistance. The way pesticides and fungicides and everything work is by poisoning the plant. It's called a systemic fungicide or pesticide. The substances are absorbed by the orchids and the orchids become toxic and poisonous to pests or fungus. And that's how it works. Now, the sad part is parasites are very good at adapting fast. So the problem is that they develop resistance to whatever substances nurseries use if they don't use them accordingly. Some pesticide labels tell you that you should use it only twice and then switch it to a different substance if it's the case. Use it only twice a year or something of the sort. And this is because you don't want the pest to develop resistance to that substance. Now, I presume some nurseries don't really respect that. And I think there's only so many substances you can rotate. And we end up getting plants and orchids with pests that have already been treated, but the pests are resistant. And here's the saddest part. Here's what I experienced 2 years ago. I had that really bad infestation of false spider mites. So at the end, as a last resource, I tried abamectin, which is a very well-known substance against spider mites. It was whatever I could purchase without a permit on the market because they're kind of regulated since they're toxic. So I tried it. I was not happy with the result. It did not take care of my issue on many plants. Why? Because the insects were resistant to that substance. Why were they resistant? Because nurseries used it excessively. So what did I resolve? Nothing. But you can imagine my frustration 2 years ago. After 3 years of battling, I finally give up and say, okay, I'm gonna buy the gear, I'm gonna protect myself, I'm gonna go on the terrace and spray as safely as I can so I don't spread it around. I treated 150 orchids and at the end of it all, multiple sprays, 2 sprays. At the end of it all, it didn't work. I was incredibly frustrated, and for that reason, I'm done with pesticides. No, thank you. I don't trust that nurseries or vendors make sure to rotate their substances. I have trust issues. I've told you this before. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm with soapy waters and oils and stuff of the sorts, and I already made them work. I'm happy. No more pesticides for me. Robert is asking if Oncidiums need a rest period in the winter or minimal watering or anything of the sorts, and the answer is no. Oncidiums are continuous growers. You don't need to stop watering or stop fertilizing. However, if your environment suffers a change in temperature or humidity or anything of the sorts, which makes water evaporate slower or makes the orchids grow slower, yes, you kind of need to adjust a little bit the watering and the fertilizing, but not because the Oncidiums are going into a rest or a break. They really are continuous growers. And some of them do set blooming in spring and autumn, and they grow in winter and summer. So they do still need water and fertilizer in the winter. Paul Saunders is asking if I can define seedling. Sure, very fast. A seedling is a very young orchid which sprouted from a seed. It wasn't cloned, it's not a keiki, it wasn't taken from an already existing mature orchid. 2 orchids were pollinated, seeds were obtained, and those seeds were germinated in special medium, and then after sprouting they were hardened off and so on and so forth. And at some point they were big enough and hardened off enough to be sold. And this is a seedling. This is my table of seedlings, actually, you can see here. Practically, it is a very young orchid with very tiny structures in comparison to the mother plant, which has in between 3 to 5 to 10 years until reaching maturity and blooming. Very encouraging, huh? Andreina is saying she has all of her phals in sphagnum moss and they love it, and then she moved a dendrobium which was dying in full water culture to moss, but she doesn't know if this orchid will like moss. Here's the thing. The medium itself doesn't really matter all that much. What matters the most is the effect. Orchids cannot really sense if something is bark or if something is moss or something of the sorts. They can sense if something is toxic or it's abrasive and hurts the roots and things of the sorts, or it's suffocating. The main concern is to provide both moisture and air at the same time. Orchids, or most of them, are epiphytic. They need tremendous quantities of air in comparison to other terrestrial plants, such as roses. With roses, you don't leave air pockets, right? The thing is, you want to give them air and moisture at the same time. You can work with any medium you want that makes your life better, as long as you give them air and water. The presence of oxygen will make sure that the roots will pick up nutrients and water, and also moisture is needed because, well, orchids need water to survive and to absorb nutrients. So whatever method you want to go for, make sure you give your orchids air and moisture. And this can be obtained with any medium you want that is suited for orchids. It's not poisonous for orchids. If you want to use sphagnum moss, you can. Just make sure it's very fluffed and not compacted and suffocating. If you want to use water, make sure that you do give air as well. Don't keep it in like full. Okay, I'm not an expert on water culture. I have no idea what the meaning of full and semi is, sorry. But what I'm saying is don't keep the root system fully submerged in water. If roots don't have any type of oxygen, it will end bad. At least, put water on the bottom and leave the other part of the root in the air. That will help. I hope it will work. So pretty much whatever method you want to use, just give air and water. I know I repeated this, but I will still repeat it because it's what I believe, what works for me. I cannot recommend anything else. And that's about it for today's Q&A. Thank you so much for sending the questions. I hope this helped you out. So you know the drill. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye! And what we have here is the bud of a rose that I recently purchased and got snapped in the car. That's okay. I have a little thing for roses I discovered. Recently at one of the flower shops that I frequent, they brought in fragrant roses and they came with the tag and everything. For 10 euros, I got this super big hybrid tea bush that is already blooming, is fragrant, it's red, it's nice. Oh my goodness, right? That was one of the expensive ones. You can imagine the rest. So I have a little thing with the roses now. I did a few videos on them, which I need to update first, monitor the growth, and then I will publish on the other channel, but I'm starting to get the hang of them. I'll tell you all about it on the other channel when I do the videos. Will you be interested in a sort of rose collection video type of thing? I have a lot of roses, you guys. Let me know down below. Everything on the other channel, not this channel.